Welcome back to the Talking with the SOT podcast. I'm Ian Campbell. We're here with some, what is it?
Level 2 day release students.
And Harnek Gill.
Yeah, and Harnek Gill. I'm here too, guys.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So we have joining us today, we have Josh Martin and we have Micheal Tremblay.
How's it going?
Great. So this is the first time having on day release students. We've recorded with a couple other students from different programs.
Yeah, we've had level 2 block on, and we're going to have at some point level 3 block.
Co-ops. Oh, level 3 and
block,
co-ops.
because
maybe.
that hasn't been released yet because I suck at editing. But
Right.
Yes.
It's okay. You can kind of keep it in order now.
Yeah, Joey and Matt, I apologize, but it'll be out soon. And we will have some FCA co-op students that are going to join us too. So yeah, we're getting a bunch of feedback from the students with that whole talking with the SOT vibe and see how it is to be a student with us.
And to find it SOT, us faculty members, we often throw around those terms, block, day release, co-ops, but a lot of people may not be familiar with what that is. And when it comes down to apprenticeship, there's a lot of different ways you can go and get licensed, a lot of different processes you can go through in order to get your on, or in-school training. So why don't you guys tell me about the day release program a little bit?
Josh, why don't you go first?
Honestly, the day release, in my opinion, is probably the easiest way to do it. You don't have to worry about going on EI for however many months the block is. Sometimes the block it's a lot more packed into how many months is the
2
block?
months.
2 months.
Just 2 months?
Yeah.
So you got a lot more packed into 2 months, and it feels more stressful than if just having 2 classes for 12 weeks, 1 day a week. It just seems it's much easier, and especially depending on the day of the week. Like
You're on Thursdays, right?
yeah,
Okay.
this year we're on Thursdays, but last year we were on Mondays, and that was super nice because we had like a whole weekend to prepare for any tests that were coming up.
You sound like a good student preparing for tests.
The weekend before.
I know,
They had
wow.
a week, but the Sunday night.
I was going the opposite way. He's ripping you. I'm like, congrats, you studied.
No, it's obviously we use the week too, but it's just nice having those 2 days before and not like having 2 days to fully prepare rather than like trying to like cram in as much as you can right after work, like on like a Tuesday, like Monday to Wednesday night.
Sure.
Right. So
I'm just going to preface that quickly by saying day release is 1 day a week for the full year, for the full
36 weeks.
Right.
August till May, pretty much. Whereas block is a 2-month step of the or timeline. So go ahead, Mike.
The one thing I find with day release versus block is mindset and your study habits. With day release, you're at school once, and we are here early in the morning. Like the sun's
7:30 class starts.
yeah, the sun's not even up when we're driving down the road. Like it's like holy smokes.
it's
But-
better than the guys that work that are doing school at Progress Campus. My buddy starts school at 8:30 and leaves at like 4 some days. So
Okay, I could live with that then. Traffic isn't so bad. But
So we do get out a little earlier. We generally finish at 3:30 or 2:30, depending on what course it is.
got a little bit more of our day after school.
That's true.
But even with, like, when you have the mindset and whatnot, you have that week that you need to make sure that you are doing your studying, you're doing your homework or anything like that. And a lot of guys, they slip up and they don't keep up with that. And that's where it could be hard. If you have a hard time self-regulating yourself to make sure that you can keep up with the course load that we're supposed to have, day release isn't really going to do too well for them. And there's even some in our class, you can kind of see that. And that's where they reach out and be like, hey, can I get a little extra help here? And
Then I tell them no. And they reach out to you, Mike.
Yeah. And then Mike says, I'll help you.
yeah, then they reach out to me, and what I don't have an issue with it, but the big thing, and Josh can contest to this, the big thing is
I'm a big culprit of that.
how you show up in class depends on how even I'm going to help you. Because if you're just going to sit there and sleep all class, and you're not going to show any effort and be like, hey, look, you know,
No
I'm trying
students sleep all class. What do you mean?
Most students, I think you mean to say.
Sorry, most students sleep all class.
I could count 5.
Oh, throwing shots.
Well, they're probably not listening anyway. We probably should get them to listen.
Fair play.
Yeah.
But with the day release, like it's got its benefits. You go and you can apply it. So you learn something with us being on Thursdays. It makes it a little trickier because you're like, okay, this is fresh in my head. And then Friday comes. Well, most shops on Friday, they're like, yeah, we're not going to work that much because it's Friday. We really don't want to. We don't want to get into something where, you know, it's the one broken bolt. 1 hour job's one broken bolt away from 6 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and
6
that's,
days. What bolt are you breaking?
try working at Hyundai.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, but with being able to have the knowledge you've learned in theory and then going back to be able to apply it makes it a little bit easier. Like, yeah, we have the lab, we have a controlled
Environment.
Thank you. To apply what we have learned. But when it comes down to some things, yeah, we're learning on things that have been taken apart numerous times. They're clean. Like, I think the cleanest alternator I've seen, other than brand new out of the box, was the one in lab class last week with you.
Yep.
So when it comes down to being able to pull certain things apart, or like, okay, this is how this works, or when it comes even brakes, when you're looking at rust or how the caliper piston is going to actually seize inside the bore, that's where you can get you're a little bit more of a hands-on, because you're looking at it. It's like, oh, you know, customers complaining about brake noise. You pull it apart. You're like, oh, I just had this in class.
Right.
Take a pocket screwdriver. Let's take a look. And you look, and lo and behold, it's there. It's fresh in your mind. You're like, oh. And you're able to apply it that much more.
And I have found that with a lot of day release students who have approached me and were like, hey, that thing you talked about last week, I went to the shop and I had that problem on a car and I could apply it. Whereas when I have block students, you know, they're here for 8 weeks and then I'll maybe see them a year later. So I guess that's always one of the advantages of day release. You can apply what you've learned in the classroom at work, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you. That's definitely one of the benefits of the program.
I like
or the
what you
format.
said. I like you said about studying though, because I'm teaching day release next year supposedly, and that's one thing that I'm curious about is I haven't taught it yet. So you have a week between, and do you retain it or do you lose it? And that's what I'm curious about, because I teach block right now, and to go to what you were saying, we have a bunch of students that are just overwhelmed with every course all day, and a few of them are really pulling their hair out. We're mid block right now. And some of these guys are like, man, that electrical midterm, like it kicked me on top of their SSB final and their, you know, engines final. So like all the tests crammed at once is fairly challenging and all the learning. So I'm curious, like maybe it's Joshua, right? Joshua, how do you take it week to week? Because it seems like you've really honed in, and then maybe you can kind of chime in after that.
No, he calls me.
Honestly, yeah. Mike's kind of like my saving grace if I'm struggling, but a lot of the time, yeah, like you said, like I honestly, I don't think I could have to deal with multiple finals at once. Like the most I ever have to worry about is 2.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the stuff, like the SSB stuff, like the suspension, like I'm better with, so I understand the content a little more. I usually do a little bit better in that.
Yeah.
But the engine stuff, it's a little bit harder to maintain, but only having to memorize 2 different classes and study for 2 different classes is a whole lot easier than 4.
I love how you said memorize, because I was talking to a student today and they're like, oh man, I got to memorize it. I'm like, are you memorizing it, or are you kind of retain? You know what I mean? And I'm curious about that too. Like, do you guys take that and memorize it so you can learn it for a test? Or do you kind of like try and figure out how it functions as you study? That's a question that I'm curious about.
Okay, I'm going to throw myself under the bus on this one. Because it's funny, because Mr. Gill is currently teaching us.
Yeah.
So the best part with that is I don't memorize anything. With my ADHD, it's hard for me to memorize certain things. So we had a test this morning for our fuels with a new teacher. Drawing a blank on his name.
Nichols.
Thank you.
Mr. Nicholson.
Mr.
Great.
Nicholson. But so he was just like, okay, here's your review and everything like that. And a lot of the guys were like, I memorized the stuff from the textbook.
Sure.
I'm like, how? How can you do that?
Right.
And there's some that will tell me, oh, I did this, I highlighted it, or, I rewrote whatever. My textbook, I think I have like 6 things written in it, 18 lines highlighted. And other than that, the only time I look at it is when I need to read it and go for a chapter test or anything like that.
Sure.
There's information that I retain naturally by reading it because the human brain is basically a supercomputer. We're able to retain certain information as long as we're able to match it with something at that moment in time that makes it easier for us to memorize it or remember it anyway. And that's one huge thing with this trade is the biggest key is knowing where we could find the information instead of trying to be like, oh, I know where this is. Like I was doing a diagnostic on a car. It was a Subaru, 2015 Subaru Outback with the 2.5 liter.
Okay.
And the customer had a oil leak. I cleaned the oil leak because she originally came in for a transmission service. Well, I seen there was a bunch of oil, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to do your transmission service because if this oil leak is actually something that's worse, I'd rather take care of that before just, drain and fill the fluid. Well, now every so often the check engine light comes back on ever since I cleaned it. Comes back on I get a lean code, and then I get a stuck rich code for my O2 sensors. So that's where it goes into, freeze frame, knowing certain things and looking up the data that the PIDs give you. And then it's not, okay, this looks like this looks like this. It's, wait a minute, where's my information? Well, my information is on the service information.
Mm-hmm.
So I go over to the computer, type in what I'm looking at, and be like, oh. And then that's where the theory comes down to is understanding what you're looking at. Because you can have a picture, but if you don't understand what you're looking at, it's hard to see what the picture is actually supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think long story short for what Mike means is you can't know what you're answering if you don't know how something works.
Okay.
So like if you're diagnosing a charging system, you have to know what's involved in that charging system and what the alternator is doing.
I love that. Yeah.
Like that's the biggest thing with my I guess he'd be like my mechanic that I would go to as an apprentice.
Yeah.
His biggest thing is like if he finds a really good video on YouTube, he'll make me watch it. And I come in the next day and he makes me answer questions and explain to him how the system works, which really helps me understand
That's an awesome
those systems.
What's it?
Mentor.
Yeah. That's an awesome mentor.
He's very old school.
Like pushing you to be better, which is not so seen anymore.
Not so much.
Yeah, I do have something about that. So I have a student that I was chatting with about this memorizing thing today because he's like, sir, I just memorized all your stuff. His name's Julian in the FCA class.
Oh, wow.
If he listens. And he's very clever, actually. He's a smart kid, but he always has a joke. And I can never tell if he's actually understanding it or not.
Yeah.
Until today. So I've had him for close to 12 weeks. And I just today figured out, he actually comprehends that because he's always got a funny joke beside it. But he says, I memorize all your stuff. And I'm like, you never pay attention in class. And he goes, I go home and I read the textbook and I do all this stuff and I read your slides and then I memorize it. I'm like, do you actually comprehend that? But he did really well on a couple tests. And I'm like, based on how you answer my questions, I say to you, you're either cheating or, you're actually comprehending this. So that's why I'm curious to see how you guys kind of work through some of that stuff. Because when it comes to the CFQ, and he said something to me, he's like, well, you got to know it all. I'm like, I don't. I passed the CFQ. I can look up everything from now on. Like, I don't need to.
You don't really have to memorize anything anymore.
And that's what I really appreciate what you said, Mike, about the service information. Like, you got to go to that, which is a big factor. Now, the reason why I say memorizing, because a lot of questions as you get to level 2, level 3 in the CFQ is analyze this and do it, where you have to put the practical part into the question, So that's why you said memorizing, and I was just curious about all that stuff.
Memorizing is just like, that's how like my brain thinks I'm doing it. But I guess it's more so I have to teach myself to understand what I'm.
As long as you can
looking at.
apply what you've memorized, I think that's fine.
Yeah. And so a very common thing that I find happens in level 1 when I teach suspensions, once I explain the different types of suspensions and categories, someone will inevitably say, "Sir, this Subaru blah, 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 what suspension is it?" I go, "I don't know. I don't memorize every single suspension."
Yeah.
But by the end of this class, you should be able
D'Amico's
to look
gonna
at
hate
it.
you. Never say multi-link.
You should be able to look at it and you would know. And if I look at a picture, I can tell you. There's no value in memorizing every suspension, every specification, like every spec out there. Doesn't make sense. But you should be able to look at it and know what you're dealing with.
It's a cool
or
party
know
trick,
where to
though.
find the info.
Unless you work at a dealership, then it would probably pay off and cut down your flat rate time to know those things.
If you're working on those all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, if you're at a small shop working on a huge array of vehicles, then knowing everything doesn't matter too much. Knowing where to find it matters. If you're at a dealership where you're working on the same Dodge Caliber 3 times a week, then
Couldn't imagine.
kind of writing that down
It's
or
the
having
same
a cheat
comeback.
sheet. Yeah.
It's
It
the
wasn't
same
mine.
caliber.
It wasn't mine, I swear. But if you have that kind of stuff, have a cheat sheet or have something, quick reference chart. I used to have a notebook on my toolbox that I would have like important things written in, so specs or this kind of stuff, and it would be right there as a quick reference to do that.
It's the 2.4 liter, since we're both Chrysler guys, the 2.4 liter, the belt routing diagram, because the belt route's very weird on
Very
those.
weird.
It loops around, so I just save it on my desktop. And I just pull that up every single time rather
Just
than
have it,
looking
like,
it up every time.
Just
right?
have it saved as your
Yeah, I saved it as a
screensaver.
picture. No, I just saved the little picture, right?
Yeah.
So it's, there are certain
Well,
things
I'm
if you're
older than you, so I
accessing
had
a lot.
it drawn on my
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It got to the point where it comes to belt routing, and this comes back to everything we're going with, but belt routing, the 2.4, that's an annoying belt routing.
Mhm.
The other belt routing that I find really annoying is the belt routing on a Audi A6 with the V8. It lops back over itself in a couple of spots.
and they're a double-sided belt.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it, it's like, hey, this goes this way. Hang on, wait a minute. No, it doesn't. And then the other one, we have a bunch of these in the engines lab, is GM's old 3.6 liter
Oh, I know that one well.
V6.
Or the
Yeah.
3.4
Yeah.
and 3.8.
through the mount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, why did, and that's one thing that we have to deal with. It's like, okay, who thought that was a brilliant idea?
Yeah.
It's to keep stuff interesting.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want it too easy. You'd get bored.
I mean, you could. I will say with that, it turned out to be an hour plus for that belt. You know what I mean, or something along those
You
lines.
get paid for it.
and
yeah.
if you get good at it, you can make good money with that stuff. So some of those engineering mistakes, I was like, I'll take that and make some cash with.
But
Absolutely.
but even with that, how you're saying, okay, that's about an hour or something like that. You go to a small shop where Josh and I are working at now. We're both working at different small shops.
Sure.
Just in case anybody gets a bright idea that we're, no, we're not. We don't work together. We're just in class together.
I don't really know him. He just showed up.
This weird guy that carpooled with me this morning.
I sent some. Never mind.
Brotherly love.
Okay.
But with that, there's when it comes down to like,
Didn't want to edit it. No.
you don't have to. But with the everything trickling down from the dealer, which is basically us as technicians, our last line of defense is the dealer. Once everything trickles out of it, a lot of people sit there and like, well, I just want to throw oil in it, or oil, brakes, drive it, whatever kind of thing. And when it comes down to, yes, this is what this should pay. Yeah, like an hour, say like replacing a belt. There are times where people are like, why do I need to pay that? And that's where this trade sadly falls short on, because it's like, well, no, this is actually what it takes, but it's the value that everybody, like I would say, like society as a whole doesn't have for us that are at this school. They don't realize that without us, they can't go anywhere.
Well, I think that's one thing too that we were seeing, during the pandemic. we look at all the stuff that's shut down, like, oh, only the essential stuff. The shops were running, right? So, I mean, we never shut down. And the funny thing is, we didn't shut down at the shop. We didn't shut down at the school either. We figured it out for like a week, but it is one of those things that you look at, like, essentially, we are essential workers because we have to keep everything moving, right? And whether it's, fleet maintenance and keeping fleet going, or servicing something like an ambulance, or day-to-day vehicles, whatever it may be, right? We do provide sort of an essential service in that way.
Or that lawyer's car that needs to show up because somebody needs that lawyer there.
Yeah, whatever it may be, right?
Sure. I think what you're kind of getting at too is the general population understanding what we do, and I think that's a big factor in the divide between old mechanic and service advisor and general population.
Yeah,
because you used to have a service advisor. It was never really a coveted role. It was usually like, oh, I'll be the in between, get yelled at a lot. And I really think that service advisor role needs to kind of change to be more of a, and I think it is. I think it has, especially at a dealership level. I'm not sure about the small shop because it's been a long time since I'm there. But if you have a good service advisor or customer representative, whether that's the tech or not, if you have the good customer representative, then you can say, this takes an hour because I have to do all this and explain it well. And then the customer goes, oh, that's what it takes. And, you see all that stuff going on. So,
and that's what I love. I'm very happy to bring the customer to the back, show them what needs to be done and what's actually involved in the job. And it is one of those things too, where, let's face it, for a long time, we had a bad reputation. Slimy mechanic.
Yeah. Grease ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever the case
ripping
is.
off customers.
Yeah.
And realistically, there is a portion of those guys still out there.
Yeah.
But, and some people don't even realize.
None of our students, though.
Well, part of it too is, doing something like misdiagnosing a car and then the customer eats it. I'd say that's wrong.
I
right?
agree.
And that's not even necessarily like malicious.
Yeah.
You're not trying to screw anyone. But if you don't know how something works and you can't diagnose it and you start to guess, very expensive to do today.
Yeah, that's true. And you see that a lot right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spin the wheel wherever it lands.
Kind of like back to what you guys are saying. So we actually, one of the guys in our class right now, he's a service advisor, but he wanted to come to school to get that knowledge so he has a better understanding of how to
love that.
How to talk to customers.
Yeah.
But then you also said a lot of the newer generation that you're finding in like the dealers, the guys that are just going to make their money, they're parts guys. They don't really do diagnostic anymore like the old generation. A lot of new guys, they get an issue on their sheet. They'll spend 10 minutes looking at it and go, okay, this looks bad. Let's do that. And then, like you said, the misdiagnostic.
I don't think that's the new generation. I think that's
been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And
it's just more, I think with diagnostic, getting paid diagnosis now is tough at many dealerships. So I think that's more prevalent or more seen. But I think there's been a lot of mechanics that have always gone, oh, let's try this. And I've fixed a lot of repairs from mechanics that go, oh, let's try this.
Yeah.
So.
And even to build that to a customer sometimes is difficult. And you have to explain, why do I need more diagnostic time? And again, I really like to talk to the customers and explain to them, this is what I've done with the 1 hour initial diagnostic time. We figured out and we honed in, it was this, the issue with this system. Now I need to test the circuits. We need to load test the circuits. We need to, before we condemn this PCM, which costs $1,000 plus programming and all that stuff, we want to really be sure. And we get that into whether it's an electrical issue or it requires an engine teardown, right? So whatever it may be, talking to the customer makes a really big difference. And if you understand it, you can explain it nice and simple to the customer. And the other side of that is I have level 3 students and we start to get into diagnostics with ABS, for example. And some of the guys are like, well, the sensor is $16, right? No one wants to pay me to diagnose it. Why don't I just throw a sensor in it?
What sensors?
Wheel speed sensor. So,
really?
The white box wheel speed sensor that even if it was a wheel speed sensor, it might not fix it because whatever defective piece of crap you bought, But that's not always the case. Sometimes the sensor is a couple $100, right? So you want to try to instill that we should diagnose things properly. But there are people at the shops who are telling their apprentices, no, just start at the cheapest part and we'll go from there. So, are you guys seeing that at your shops at all, or what's the atmosphere around diagnosing something?
My shop, not so much, as I kind of explained earlier. Like I call him a mentor because he's mentoring me in the trade. He hates parts changers. Like he wants, if you're fixing something, he wants it fixed properly. There's the occasional time where a customer wants to see something done and will make an educated guess on what it is because that's what the customer wants. But we'll never just, okay, we think your PCM's bad, so we're going to get a PCM from a scrapyard. But yeah, we try to avoid the whole parts changing things unless we're dead set. But we've also had a few cars come in the last few weeks. We had a Hyundai Genesis G80.
Needs an engine.
No, it doesn't. But so oil pressure light would come on and off and start flashing. And to get to the oil pressure switch, you have to remove the whole intake plenum, which is 3 hours. And we weren't going to do that to diagnose it because the part was on back order. We weren't going to be able to get it that day. There was no dead set time. So the part itself was only like $30, but we ended up ordering the part, telling the customer we wanted to try that. And anyways, long story short, yesterday we got the part, put it in, oil pressure light went away. And then the customer drove 10 minutes down the road and their engine light came on for a crank position sensor issue. So now they're kind of upset with us, but they're not because we're trying to like explain to them that they're not related like at all, really. Like the oil pressure sensor was flashing your light. It was seeing something wrong in the circuit, and we could see that on the scan data. But the crankshaft sensor code now it's hard to tell because there's no, like the scan data looks normal. Like there's no issues on the scan data when we look at it, but something's happening to where that light's coming on.
It's the connector you unplugged and forgot to plug back in on the way.
It might be, but
it's a crank. It wouldn't have ran. It's okay. It's not you guys.
Yeah.
Shall we go back to the point that it's a Hyundai, it needs an engine as much as we're going home in an engine?
No, that's got the 3.3 twin turbo.
Oh,
I feel sorry for you.
All right. I have a couple questions for students that I like to ask, and it's, what is the hardest thing you've had to learn so far? So you guys are level 2, right? Is that correct? Level 2? So what is the hardest thing that you've come across that you've had to learn or be tested on or something like that?
My teacher's standing over there. I can't say anything.
You can say I'll slap him.
Hey man, I mean, if you say it's the hardest, I don't really have a problem with that.
He kind of likes it.
Yeah.
He's a jerk.
Depends what part we're talking about.
It's
being
too
the
easy. Eh? Let's make it more difficult.
The SSB is nice. The electrical is a little confusing, but this one's not so bad because I feel like we deal with charging systems the most. So if we are doing them at work, it's a lot easier to kind of follow along in class.
So what do you think, Mike? What's the hardest thing you've had to learn so far? It could be level 1 thing. It could be anything. It could be lighting torches. Who knows?
The big,
we weren't allowed to play with fire.
A before O or up you go. The biggest thing that I found that was a challenge was that switch from level 1 engines to level 2 engines, because like we have as day release, we have a fantastic engines teacher. It's Mr. Mont, and he's phenomenal. He goes in depth and everything like that. And not to say you're not phenomenal, also, Mr. Gill.
You don't have to do that every time. You're okay. You're okay.
But well, credit is due where credit is due,
of course.
But when it comes down to that switch with engines, both I found that okay, we're going in, and this is the basics, everything like that, how it goes, intake, exhaust, etc. Yeah, I know we're missing compression and power, but but like for
he's a great teacher
for how it goes. And then as soon as you go into level 2, it's just like, hey, guess what? You know, that was just the tip of the iceberg, because here's the rest of it. This is what sank the Titanic, and it's like, holy,
what top end sank the Titanic?
The overlap.
Yeah, the overlap did it. The overlap of the Titanic hitting the
Iceberg, yeah.
Overlap, the timing, and like when you're really sitting there and you're really getting down to the nitty gritty science of it. It's like, what am I looking at? Like, I even printed off his slides because he gets us to print off the slides to make sure that we're able to pay attention and write out the notes and whatnot. I think it was 180 something pages in total.
Wow.
Like I could write a little textbook of it.
Yeah.
And for me, being able to go over all the minute details that we need to know as technicians, that is where I was like, holy smokes. Like, this is actually a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that, your first rotation, okay, you had summer, and it's like, okay, so now we're back in class. And then we're like, oh, great. So we have engines, and then we have SSB. So we have a really hard course, and then we have a moderately hard course.
Oh, wow. You got to make it harder.
Yeah, it's not hard enough.
No, it's a nice change of pace.
But that's where I found where, for me personally, that's where it was my, okay, I need to make sure that I'm awake. It's a coffee right here. It's my pencil's out and I'm writing out what I need to write.
Cool. I love, that's a really introspective answer. I really, really like that. Normally people are like, planetary gears suck or something like that, you know? So hearing that transition from level 1 to level 2 is awesome. I've never heard that before, but I get it. And it makes a lot of sense. So cool. What about you?
Honestly, same with Mike. Level 1 for me, the hardest one I had issues with was electrical. I'm still having issues with it. There's just a lot of fine details you have to know.
Okay.
But the biggest, with like what Mike said, the switch from level 1 to level 2 for me was in drivetrains and engines.
Yeah. Like
drivetrains level 1, the manual transmissions,
pretty easy.
They're easy.
Yeah.
They're easy to understand, especially when you get to take them apart. You get to see how everything's working.
Mm-hmm.
But level 2, we get into automatics, planetary gear sets.
I love it. It's my favorite
Which
course.
they're not like hard. Like it makes sense when you see them taken apart and like the big like diagram.
Sure.
But
do they though? Because it's a lot of fluid moving stuff.
it is like the fluid moving through the torque converter.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I probably would not be able to tell you a single term for anything right now. But
So you memorized it well.
absolutely.
12 weeks.
12 weeks of an absolute nightmare.
So you think drivetrains, the engines and drivetrains switch to level 2 was tough?
Yeah, I did pretty good level 1 engines, but it was all the basic stuff, right? Like
I feel like that's kind of normal too, because you come in with as an apprentice, you come in with knowledge, right?
Yeah,
you guys are working in the
basic
shop
stuff.
and the basics, and you've been taught that by a good mentor or somebody you work with, or you've watched a YouTube video on it,
High
that
school
kind of stuff.
auto and stuff like that.
Yep.
That's all there.
And then that level 2 is, okay, let's slap you in the face a little bit. Here's a whole bunch of sensors you need to know. And you're like, what?
yeah, exactly.
I've had a few students just answer PTO electric for everything. And I was like,
I
why?
love seeing questions like that because I hope no one picks it, but I always get a good laugh when I see that on there.
Okay, so to counter that, that's the hardest thing. What's been your favorite thing to learn so far?
So everybody, and now this goes back to why people come to me to tutor, to help them like outside of the class and whatnot. Other than the Hyundai that I own, I also own 2 Volkswagens.
Okay.
It's
And
unfortunate. I'm sorry.
to understand, the easiest way to understand Volkswagen electronics, and Hyundai's copied this, isn't conventional theory. It's electron theory. So for me to be able to understand electricity, and I have a secret background to this too, but
Secret.
Dude,
yes.
what is he, Batman or something?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
He's got a secret layer of Volkswagen.
You should see his garage. It's scattered with
DOS
Volkswagen
Auto.
parts.
5 years for my secret, 5 years in the armed forces as a communications line technician.
Okay.
Cool.
So being able to understand how electricity works, how to understand communication works and stuff like that, like CAN bus, and that's my little secret.
For sure.
So when it comes down to being able to look at, this is how we need to diag this is how we need to build this, I don't have an issue with that. So understanding the electron theory makes it that much more easier to know how the switch is going to interact with whatever the load is on the circuit. So when a lot of the guys would be like, hey, Mike, do you understand this? Yeah, I can help you with that. And this is how this would work. And our previous rotation, we had Mr. Lorette and Mr. Lopes. And one of the questions we had is how a Zener diode works. Or, no, it's just a diode. Anyway, that's besides the point. But one of the answers on there that wasn't a hey, this is right, was how does a diode work with like electron flow or like conventional flow? And for me, the only way that I found it easier for me to remember how a diode works is electron flow, because you have your P and N type materials, and your electrons flow to positive because your positive material has one less electron and your negative material has one more electron. So it being able to flow and go that way. And like I said, hey, look, that's right, because that's actually how I remember how a diode works. And he's like, oh yeah, that's right. So for me, electrical was a light bulb.
What about you, Josh?
I'm gonna be honest, I forgot the question.
Your
I was kinda
favorite,
listening.
your favorite thing.
Favorite thing?
Yeah.
My Xbox.
In class.
Favorite subject
During
or
class.
something you
Call
enjoy
of Duty
doing
during class.
Honestly, this year for me is probably the level 2 suspensions, because
Shut up, Mr.
No.
Gill's right here.
I'm not even sucking up.
He almost failed that class.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
What part
Solid
of it, though?
53.
Like what specific component was your favorite?
It wasn't even the component.
No. I need a specific thing.
But I can't tell you that, because like for me it was I do a lot of suspension work at our
Okay.
shop because I'm level 2, like the diagnostic stuff. They don't have time, like during the busy seasons, we don't have time for me to like sit there and try to figure it out. So
Yeah.
a lot of the time I'll try to watch, but I get more of the suspension stuff because I understand it.
Okay.
So this year was really nice to really kind of get all like the finer details and terms and knowing how to explain different suspensions.
Yeah.
We did a lot of that in level 1
Okay.
too.
So
but
it really related to what you're doing at work. Okay.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's the easiest stuff to retain and apply, right? What you're doing at work.
Mhm.
And that usually does get, I find, students a little bit more excited. And if you are teaching something that they've, I think this is the hardest thing with drivetrains and why so many struggle with it. If they're not rebuilding transmissions, they're not even re-and-reing transmissions
That's
all
why
that much.
it's my favorite thing to teach.
Yeah, because they got no idea.
If you can actually get them to like get it, then it's a cool thing.
Or to
It's a-
memorize it. For
Or
4
to
weeks.
memorize it for 4 weeks. It's fine, but it's a fun. I like that course a lot. Yeah.
Hold 2, drive 1.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more than that when it comes to level 3 and automatic and,
And
electronic.
every day I eat
and it's
rice
fun.
and
I don't. Yeah, we'll get Mr. Mantis on at some point. It's gonna be fun. I was chatting with him the other day about it. He's ready.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
He's got lots of jokes, and if you know Mr. Mantis, oh boy,
These guys wouldn't be with Mantis, but some of the day release guys, my level 1
Yeah.
group, did have.
that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, awesome. Is there anything else you guys want to give some advice about, or say out in the ether of the podcast world?
Definitely pay attention in class. Like one of the biggest things that with now seeing and everybody being like, hey, Mike, can you help me with my homework kind of thing? As much as it's a push, whether you're a block or day release where you have that like extra a few days, everything has its challenges. Everything has its ups and downs. But if you're sitting there in class and you're like say, drivetrains and automatic transmissions and planetary gear sets, even being able to hold, ring gear,
Sure.
driving your planetary gear set or your sun gear, depending on how it is, being able to find a way to relate that to anything that you normally see as you're paying attention in class, like you write a note, like, okay, so this is planetary gear set. What would I do with this? Well, if you're sitting there and you're thinking about it and you have a coffee cup in your hand, you can't spin your coffee cup if you're holding it.
Okay.
So just like the small little things of what you see in everyday life to be able to help you remember.
Make it practical for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like you learn very practically or
By applying it.
tangibly kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's very common in our trade too. But let me ask you this. Why do you think there's so many guys who aren't paying attention?
That's a great question. Yeah. Like Josh.
Yeah, I am a culprit of that sometimes. Sometimes
You didn't have to admit this.
I got no problem admitting it. I try my hardest, but sometimes you just get that off day.
Wall, you hit the wall.
You just kind of hit a wall and you just crash. And
I think it's hard for guys who are working in the shop to then sit down in a class for hours.
I have something to say about
Right?
this right now.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I just started WPP1 for Block.
Yep.
These guys have had 4 weeks of class. Now I come in. They're all apprentices.
Mhm.
I come in and I'm supposed to talk about the first week, hand tools and
Right.
screwdrivers.
Yeah.
And these guys are all asleep. And I'm putting the document camera on them falling asleep, just trying to make some fun of the class. But I'm like, you guys know what a Phillips is, right? And it's like
That guy's sitting there. It's Philip.
It's
Yeah.
like, what's your favorite socket? I'm like trying to make it like somewhat interesting. And at least that point, they're like, oh, I really like my flex quarter mil or quarter 10
Sure.
mil. I'm like, oh, and there's a story, but I'm like, no wonder you guys are sleeping. Like
Yeah.
here's an extension. What does it do, guys? Like, come on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that brings you back to like how you asked, how are people not, like, what makes me think that some people are not paying attention? Well, there's some that are sleeping because
Yep.
we're up earlier than
Sure.
everybody else. And then there are other times where you have certain subjects that are like dry, like
dull.
talking about
Like Mr. Pert was just
alternators.
here.
Like, talking about alternators for 6 weeks is pretty challenging. Like, I got to give you credit, Mr. Gill. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, he gets paid
After
the
a
big
certain amount
bucks.
of time, I just started making it up.
yeah, we've heard this term field circuit like 7 times a day, every hour.
You know, every time
Still no one knows what it is.
every time I get to class, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I sense a disturbance in the voltage here.
Yeah.
But like when it comes down to not being able to pay attention or like losing the focus, we're all in this trade because we all work with our hands.
Sure.
And that's where it intrigues us. It's a challenge. We're always mentally challenged. But when we have a toolbox,
I mean,
with
that's an awkward way to say it.
not
We're all mentally challenged. But,
intellectually
Some of us
challenged.
are.
I was like, yeah.
Intellectually challenged. Like we need a challenge that is like, oh hey, that really makes us think.
we like to be challenged.
We like
mentally.
to be challenged mentally.
There we
Wow,
go.
that still sounds wrong. Yeah.
Sounds better than we're all mentally challenged.
It could be true though. It could be.
This is why I sit in the corner in class. But like when you have to sit there, like you said, you have students that have been in class for a while, and it's like, this is Phillips screwdriver. Well, I got like 4 Phillips screwdrivers in my toolbox. It's like, well, that's nice. Yeah, that's a Phillips screwdriver. I know what that does, but it also works as a punch too. Like I shouldn't be using it this way, but I need to like get that.
Hey, man,
socket
Usually
bolt out of
scold
my
those
socket.
guys that say
Those
that in class,
full
too.
punch sets are expensive.
They are.
So you use your Snap-on Phillips.
Sometimes, hey, free replacement.
I don't use Snap.
They don't.
I go to
My guy
Mastercraft.
doesn't ask questions. If I break that head off, he's just gonna give me a new
That's
head.
the second time I've heard that. Mine doesn't ask questions. They just replace it. I'm like, man.
Oh, did you have
Snap-on
a?
dealers. I had a
Yeah.
one that was a bit more rigid.
Don't go on the Snap-on truck without a buddy. You will
Yeah,
get in
Leave your
trouble.
wallet in your box.
Yeah, don't take a wallet at all.
All right. So yeah, I think that's a good spot. I think
Yeah.
we're in a good shape. What do you think? Any more questions for the guys, or should we get into the special ones?
I think we'll get into the less mentally challenging
Yeah.
questions.
I think I'm gonna run now.
So the first question is, if you could own or operate any vehicle,
Any vehicle,
Any-
fictional.
yeah,
anything.
fictional vehicle.
I
like
added
what?
in fictional because I do an assignment for my level 1s, and they have to put their favorite vehicle in there. I even added fictional as long as it's respectful. I don't want anything like disrespectful flying through the air pictures. But
I want an Optimus Prime. Like
whatever, anything. Yeah.
Okay. So if you want any vehicle, guess fictional, or what would you pick?
Josh, you go first.
No, honestly, I think I could probably speak for me and Mike both. We were talking about it earlier. Just any generation Porsche GT3, GT3 RS. Okay. They are purpose built out of the box to do what I think cars are supposed to be able to do.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, my fighter jet
is designed for what cars are supposed to do.
It's a way better thing than that. Okay, so a GT3, yeah, good car. I like that too.
They look good, they sound good, and they just I want to drive one. I know they do like exotic days and stuff at tracks, but they're phenomenal.
I like
cars.
That's a pretty practical answer too. It's like I love cars. This is one of the better made cars of the last 60 years or whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
Let's do
so is that your answer too, Mike, or do you have something different?
Yeah, I kind of converted them over.
Yeah, we were talking about it this morning.
Yeah, what were you thinking initially?
Was the original thought?
Well, I don't know. Like I guess I kind of have more of like a practical mindset. Like I have a 23 GR86, which is just a BRZ with a Toyota badge.
Yeah.
So I kind of get to drive that fun car during the summer, which it's like serotonin. It just makes you happy. You got to drive a car that makes you happy. Unless you don't care about your car. If you don't care about your car, who cares?
All right. So Mike,
definitely for me, it's like I have 2 Volkswagens sitting at home.
Sure.
But yeah, the 2019 plus Porsche 911 GT3 RS.
It's Porsche. Gotta get it right.
Whatever.
I have 2 Volkswagens in my driveway. I have Vito.
Okay. Yeah, so a newer one then. You like the new ones?
I like the new ones. I like the old ones. The biggest thing is that flat 6. It just, I'm a car guy through and through. I've been busting my knuckles on cars since I was 8. So it's like, for me, it's my blood. I can't really, I have a hard time doing anything else. But like those cars, like Josh said, they're purpose built. They're absolutely fun to drive. But the place, if I had to also choose, so we'll take 2 911 GT3 RSs.
All right.
And
so
it's
only a low cost of like $500,000, but no biggie.
I mean,
I hope
still relatively low. Yeah,
that's true.
I hope a Porsche dealership is actually listening to us right now.
PFAF
sponsorship. But there's a road that is in the Alps between Romania and Italy.
Okay.
And I showed a picture to Josh in class. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Not paying attention. Click the wrong button for what the answer was. Wink. It's not sense voltage.
Okay.
Don't edit that out either. But it's the road goes down and through the Alps.
Okay.
And it's not like here where you have a hill. We cut down through the hill or whatever. It actually goes back on a switchback. And one part of this road, it's like 10 switchbacks to go down the mountainside.
So like a hairpin, basically.
Yeah. So it rolls back. A switchback is basically when a path or a roadway or anything like that goes down a part of a hill, does like a 90-degree turn, comes back across, and it does that to get down a really tall grade. At the bottom of that, it starts to get a little windy, a little open up, but it's an absolute stunning
visual.
Yeah, visual in a valley, and it just flows. It's not like a straight line like a lot of roads are here in North America and whatnot. Like it flows with the landscape.
Awesome.
And that on a nice summer day, cars wide open, I'll take that any day.
Well, the other student was like, I'll take through the Alps an elephant along with Hannibal through the Alps.
Matt did
Interesting how we ended up there again.
Yeah, that one's not out yet, but you guys will listen. That's fun.
And our other question is, if you could be anyone, once again, real or fictional, for a day, who would you be?
Dominic Toretto. I want to fly a car out of a plane.
Brilliant. Family.
Listen, family. I want to take my Charger and dive out of a plane with a parachute on my car. So
That's a great answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe not a great answer, but it's a fun answer.
What are you thinking, Mike?
See, no, you didn't take my answer. I have you as family, and we're okay.
Oh. You'll survive anything.
Yeah, exactly. To be somebody, somebody asked this if I wanted to be either Goku or Superman. I'm like, that's heads or tails either day. X-ray vision will make this trade a hell of a lot easier.
Okay.
But at the same time,
I'm glad you went with this trade.
Same with the strength. Oh, that bolt's not coming loose. I got you. But even then, like, I'm probably a bit more Superman.
Okay.
But I know
which Superman.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Which Superman is the best Superman? Because I already have the right answer to this. But let's see what you got.
Too. It's different than his answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
But I control his grade, see?
I will challenge you on this one. There is 2 Superman that I absolutely feel is fantastic.
There's 2 I would accept. Okay. There is 2 that I would accept.
So we are going to go with the original Superman, Christopher Reeves.
Okay.
And the only Superman that he endorsed, which was the only Superman he ever showed up with, and that was Tom Welland's for TV show Smallville.
Okay.
It's the baseline of how that goes.
Yes. Smallville was a great show.
The other answer I would have taken was from Superman, the animated series. Kevin Conroy, I believe, was his name.
Nope.
Kevin Conroy was Batman.
Oh, yeah, he was Batman. I'm trying to remember
who
did
one.
Superman's voice.
Henry Cavill all the way.
I can't remember who did Superman's voice, but
for live action.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
For live action, Henry Cavill's been
I do
great.
think he did do a good job with Christopher Reeves, just so iconic.
I'm a fanboy of him.
I think I'm too young for Christopher Reeves Superman.
Whoa. Hang on a sec. I may be like nearly 10 years older than you, but holy smokes, buddy. You still got to ride home with me.
Yeah, no, definitely Henry Cavill. That was awesome, guys. Thank you so much for jumping on. We'll be in touch, and until next time.
This has been the Talking with SOT podcast with Harnek and Ian Campbell. Thanks for listening. And just so you know, there will be a quiz next week.
I forgot he always says that. There's a quiz next week.